So on the face of it, verbals are quite a complex feature to talk about, but I think they're quite good for grammar, and actually easier maybe than you might first think to actually discuss, and it allows you a wider range for AL1 if you're talking about some of these features, and if you can talk about the effect, allows you to also access the higher grades for AL3. So I think it's worth looking at and thinking about. So there's three types of verbals, and that's gerunds, participles, and infinitives. Again, quite complex, but do sound very impressive, and I think easier to spot than you might actually think. So gerunds are simply verbs that end in ing, so your ing verbs, but to be a gerund they have to actually function as a noun. Okay, so if I said I was running a marathon, running isn't a gerund because it's still a verb. Was running was what I was doing. But actually, it's relatively easy to spot. If you see an ing verb that is followed by is, or was, or were, or am, or a verb like that, then it has to be acting like a noun. So if you look at, swimming is my favourite hobby, in that case, swimming isn't a verb. You're not doing the swimming. Swimming is a thing. It's a noun. Or meeting you was amazing. Again, meeting is a thing that happened. It's not, you're not saying I was meeting my friend. Going out is difficult at the moment. Again, going out is the noun. That's the thing that you're describing as being difficult. Similarly, sometimes gerunds are an ing verb that are followed by a common verb. So you might have something like, I can't stand people smoking. Again, that's the thing you can't stand. The smoking is the thing you can't stand. If I said, the fire was smoking, that's what the fire was doing. In this case, I can't stand people smoking. That's the thing that you can't stand. I love working outside. Again, working outside is the thing that you like to do. I can't help moaning. Again, it's the thing that you can't help doing. So if it's a word that's normally a verb ending in ing and it functions as a noun, then it is a gerund. If you can spot it, you can label it as such. If you can talk about the effect, you can go into a deeper level for context as well. Participles, okay, these are basically verbs that work like adjectives, so they will end in ing or ed or other endings. Basically, the normal form of the verb has changed. Okay, to put it either in the past or to put ing at the end, and it's used like an adjective. Again, it sounds hard, but if you see a verb that ends with ing or ed and it's describing something, then it's a participle. So, for example, the singing canary was very cute. Okay, was is the verb in that sentence. Singing is a description. It's the singing canary. It's a description of the canary. It's a participle because it's a verb that's working like an adjective. The damaged car stopped after a while. Again, if I said I damaged my leg, damaged is a verb, it's what you did, but in this case, the damaged car, it's a description of the car. My failing attempts to make a laugh were ridiculous. Again, the attempts are described as failing, so the verb is working like an adjective, so you can label it as a participle. The fallen statue hadn't been repaired yet. Again, I'm not saying I had fallen, in which case it's a verb. In this case, it's the fallen statue. The verb here is hadn't been. Okay, the fallen is a description of the statue. They're adjectives that work. They're verbs that work like adjectives, so they're participles. And then the third one is actually, I think, probably the easiest one to find. Okay, these are infinitives. So an infinitive is the word to that's followed by a verb. That is literally it. So to live here would be lovely. It's hard to pass this test. I love to dance. So if it's a verb and there's a to before it, it's an infinitive. And as I said there, even just being able to spot them and talk about why they're used is a really good starting point, particularly on that grammar question. A lot of people start talking about whether it's a declarative or an interrogative. Okay, that will get you so far, but if you're just talking about sentence functions, it's quite limited for grammar. These sorts of things will allow you to add more range to what you're talking about. Just remember, word of caution, it has to be a verb after the to. So you can't just look for the word to and every time it's there say that it's an infinitive. So an example there, I've moved to Nuneaton. Well, that's not an infinitive because Nuneaton isn't a verb. Okay, Nuneaton is a proper noun. Okay, so that's where you've gone to. It has to be a verb after the to. Now, if you are confident finding them, and like I say, it's relatively easy, it's to followed by a verb, that's an infinitive. So what you could then talk about for grammar is, well, how are they used? And they could be used in those four ways. They could be used as a subject, so to win isn't easy. In that case, it almost works like a noun, doesn't it? It's the subject of the sentence. To win isn't easy. That's kind of the thing that is difficult. That's the subject to that sentence. To fight with you is exhausting. Again, it's almost like a noun. It's the subject to that sentence. That's the thing that is described then as exhausting. Sometimes they're used as an object, so they love to defend. They are the subject. To defend is what they love to do. I would like to help you. Again, to help or to help you becomes the object of that. Sometimes they're used as an adjective or a compliment. So my dream is to live here. So to live here describes the dream. Well, dream is a noun. A dream is a thing. So my dream is to live here. So it works like an adjective. Or you want me to leave. Okay. So again, the to leave describes me. That's what you want me to go and do. Similarly, they can almost be used like an adverb. So we must work hard to succeed. So adverbs describe the verb. They describe how, what, where, when, why. Well, in this case, it describes the why, doesn't it? We must work hard. Well, work is your verb. Why must you work? To succeed. So that's your adverb. It describes why you must do it. Or I will learn to sing. So that describes what. Yeah, will learn is your verb. What will you learn? To sing. So it's an infinitive, but it works like an adverb. And like I say, you might not be 100% confident with classifying it in the right way, but just spotting it as such as an infinitive and talking about why it might be used is better than kind of leaving these things out. If you are more confident, that can really help you again and talk about more interesting elements here. So some examples from the papers that I've picked out before after the general election. So we've got here, this allows Mr Johnson to govern for a full term with a working majority, the bit that I've highlighted there. So that's a really good example of a participle. Okay, it's a verb, working is a verb, but in this case it's working as an adjective, or it acts as an adjective because the majority is described as a working majority, so that's a participle. Okay. Later on, the Tories have recovered their claim to be Britain's most enduring governing force. So that's an infinitive because be is a verb, and to means that it's infinitive because it's to followed by a verb. In that case, I'd say that infinitive is acting like an adjective, really. Okay, because it's describing the claim. What's the claim? Well, to be Britain's most enduring governing force. I like that one in a Brexit-dominated context. I'd class that as a participle. Okay, dominated is a verb, but in this case, it's describing the contest itself. The contest, which is your noun, is described as Brexit-dominated. So the dominated, becomes the participle there. Britain is a very divided country. Again, another participle. So the verb is divide. You had the D on the end to change the tense, but it's now used as a description. Britain is a country, that's your noun, but it's described as divided. Mr Johnson would be wise to take account of these facts too. Okay, this one's a bit of an awkward one. I'd classify this as an infinitive that's kind of working like an adverb, because he would be wise. How or why would he be wise? Well, he would be wise if he took account. Okay, so it describes the verb, it describes the being. How would he be wise? Well, to take account. Or why would he be wise? Well, if he took account of it. Okay, so in terms of that spotting them, what could you do with that? Well, the working, you could talk about the effectiveness of the fact that Boris Johnson sort of won the election, what it allows him to do. The recovering their claim to be Britain's most enduring governing force, I think, emphasises the power of the Conservative Party after he's done that. So it's showing that for the next so many years, 4 or 5 years, they have that power, and the to be shows that in the moment they're still going to have this. Brexit-dominated contest reminds us that was all people were thinking about. Many of the readers here would have been Remain leaners. The Guardian generally voted Remain, so it's something that they would have been quite frustrated about. The divided country shows the issues in Britain at the time, and then would be wise to take account. It adds a note of caution, doesn't it? It implies that maybe Boris Johnson won't be wise. By using it as that adverb, he would be wise if he did take account. But will he? It adds that note of kind of confusion. Many of the Guardian readers wouldn't necessarily be a fan of Boris Johnson and might suspect that no, actually he won't be wise at all. Other ones here, this is the words of Jeremy Corbyn in the Mirror. He says this party exists to represent them. That's a great example of an infinitive. To, followed by a verb, which is represent. So that's working like an adverb. This party exists. Exists is your verb. Well, why does it exist? To represent them. Okay. Emphasises Jeremy Corbyn's claim that Labour are ultimately the party of the working people. Emphasises, who he feels are his core voters. He'd stopped short of taking blame for the poll pummelling. A great example there of a gerund. Okay, because pummelling is a verb. You might say, I was pummelling the punch bag, but in this case it becomes a noun. It's the pummelling that he had. Shows the level of damage that this inflicted, takes away some of his power. And then later on it talks about the MPs who are unlikely to hold back. Okay, so in that case I'd say it's infinitive that works kind of like a I'd say more so like a an adjective come adverb here in this case. I think you could argue kind of what it's describing. Is it describing them? Okay, so so they're not going to hold back. So it's sort of describing what they're not rather than what they are. You could argue it works like an adverb. They are unlikely to hold back. How what are they unlikely to do? Well, to hold back. You could sort of debate that one, but I think in that case again it shows that imminent threat to Jeremy Corbyn after he did that actually hold back in a fight you'd hold someone back. It's saying they're not going to, so it makes it sound like a real battle where there's real ill will. And then the TV review from The Sun, which remember is quite conservative leaning, they were quite happy about the general election result. He describes Channel 4 as the one network who are actually stupid enough to glory. Okay, I think that's a more straightforward infinitive, so to glory is your verb in this case. That one functions, I think, much more clearly like the adjective. Is describing Channel 4. They're stupid and they're also glorying in it. Yeah, they're so stupid that they glory in it, really mocking them. He's implying that this is something to be ashamed of and how ridiculous that they glory in it. So really taking away the power of Channel 4. He talks about the booking. So again, to book is a verb. This becomes booking or bookings in this case. So in that case, that's another gerund. Yeah, the bookings that they had made. That's your verb which acts as you know, and the bookings that they had made. Again, implies that Channel 4 are only interested in getting people who were left wing. And then a really interesting one towards the end, he talks about Catherine Ryan, whose job seemed to be agreeing with Labour's Shami Chakrabarti. The ridiculousness that a show that should be neutral is taking sides. He talks about Catherine Ryan. Her job seemed to be. I'd argue in that case it functions like an adverb. It's describing how did it seem. Yeah, what did her job seem? Well, it seemed to be this. So it describes the what. Yeah, what did it seem? Well, it seemed to be this. And then you get her job seemed to be agreeing with Labour's Shami Chakrabarti, which I'd argue in this case is a gerund. What was her job? I think that becomes a what. What was her job? Agreeing was her job. So it strips her job down, and by using that gerund, makes it sound like Catherine Ryan can't think for herself and has to do what Channel 4 want to do. So these are tricky in the sense of they're a little bit more complex, but I think you can spot them relatively easy. There's clues, the to, the ing are clues that they're there, and if you can talk about them, it adds real weight to anything you want to say about grammar.